All right, so let's jump into chapter 8 of The Power of Now. It's called Enlightened Relationships. This is one of my favorite chapters of the book. Now, if you're watching this at home, I'm sure you already have a perfectly 100% enlightened relationship, and you learn nothing from this chapter, But for the rest of us, let's dive into some of the key ideas of this chapter. We're not going to cover everything, but I want to touch on a few of the big ideas. And the first one is this idea of this love-hate relationship that is so common in marriages and in intimate relationships. And Eckhart's not talking about true love here. He's talking about this neediness or this codependency, this way of using the other person to cover up your own pain or avoid the work that you need to do. It's sort of like, as long as you are filling the emptiness that I feel, then I don't have to deal with the emptiness and we're good and we're okay. But as soon as you stop doing what I need you to do, then you're not the right person for me and I should jump on to the next person that maybe could do that. And that's why we see divorce rates are so high these days. He talks about true love being different than this. He says, love is a state of being. Your love is not outside, it's deep within you. You can never lose it. It cannot leave you. It's not dependent on some other body, some external form. In the stillness of your presence, you can feel your own formless and timeless reality as the unmanifested life that animates your physical form. You then can feel the same life deep within every other human and every other creature. You look beyond the veil of form and separation. This is the realization of oneness. This is love. Wow, that's quite different than just needing someone else to fix you, and that's love. That, of course, is codependency, and that is really us bringing our own baggage to a relationship and saying it's the other person's job to fix my emotional baggage. That is a recipe for disaster, and that is what our ego is doing. And so he says, there comes a point when your partner behaves in ways that fails to meet your needs, or rather the needs of your ego. The feelings of fear, pain, and lack are an intrinsic part of ego consciousness, but have been covered up by the love relationship, and they now resurface. When those painful feelings reappear, you feel them even more strongly than before. And what is more, you now perceive your partner as the cause of those feelings. This means you project them outward and attack with all the savage violence that is a part of your pain. So our pain, we're saying, you, because you're not following my agreement, I'm feeling my pain again. This is your fault. You're causing my pain. This attack may awaken the partner's own pain, and she or he may counter your attack. At this point, the ego is still unconsciously hoping that its attack or its attempts at manipulation will be sufficient punishment to induce your partner to change their behavior so that it can use them again as a cover-up for your own pain. Now, of course, we're not talking about physical violence and things like this. We need to seek help for that. We need to have strict, healthy boundaries about things like that. Of course, seek help if there's any physical violence. We're talking about emotional baggage and the things we bring to the relationship, our old history and our old problems. Then we get triggered by something they say and we blame them for all this rage that we feel. But Eckhart is encouraging us to use them as a mirror and notice that all of this that's coming up out of us, this anger, this fear, is our own stuff that we've been covering up, that we haven't dealt with. And this is our opportunity to not blame them and attack them, but to realize that this is our work. This is what we need to address. He says, they do not cause pain and unhappiness. They bring out the pain and unhappiness that is already in you. And so this is our work that we all have to do. Use it as a mirror to look inward and see where we can grow to be our best selves and have the healthiest relationship we can. So let's jump on to the next big idea. presence and acceptance. This is the next big idea that I want to talk about. And of course, this idea runs throughout the entire book. But when it comes to enlightened relationships, we're looking to learn how to move past this old love-hate relationship, this idea that's based off of codependency and off of ego and off of addiction to the other person and avoiding our own inner work that we need to do and blaming the other person. We want to move away from all this into something more beautiful and something more pure. And how we do that is we bring acceptance to what is and our full presence to the relationship. Then we can get out of this automatic reaction and being triggered by the other person of all this old baggage and this pain and trauma that we carry, and then we blame the other person and we project it onto them and we just react with everything that's coming out instead of being present, watching there's that stuff coming up, and then choosing how do we want to respond? How do we want to react? And it's only when we're able to hang on to that presence that we're able to actually have a choice on how we respond. If we're lost in our minds, if we're lost in autopilot, if we're lost in that trigger, that old trauma, it's just going to pour out of us and we have this big reaction. And this is so detrimental to our relationships. So how do we get there? Eckhart says, being present and intensifying your presence by taking your attention ever more deeply into the now, whether you're living alone or with a partner, this remains the key. For love to flourish, the light of your presence needs to be strong enough that you no longer get taken over by the thinker or the pain body and mistake them for who you are. This is key. Being present and watching those reactions, that's how we don't get caught up in that and lose our consciousness in that way. To disidentify from the pain body is to bring presence into the pain and thus transmute it. To disidentify with thinking is to be the silent watcher of your thoughts and behaviors, especially the repetitive patterns of your mind and the roles played by the ego. If you stop investing it with selfness, the mind loses its compulsive quality, which basically is the impulsion to judge and so to resist what is, which creates conflict, drama, and new pain. In fact, the moment that judgment stops through acceptance of what is, you are free from the mind. You have made room for love, for joy, for peace. First, you stop judging yourself, then you stop judging your partner. Now, I don't know about you, but judging my partner has not worked super well for me in the past. And also trying to change them and get them to do what I think is best, this doesn't work either. I mean, we know deep down that we can't change the other person. Now, they can change, but they change from within. They change because they realize something is better or they want something different, not because you changed them, right? So this is one of my favorite lines. He says, the greatest catalyst for change in a relationship is complete acceptance of your partner as he or she is without needing to judge or change them in any way. Wow. Let's practice that together. That immediately takes you beyond ego. All mind games and addictive clinging are then over. There are no victims and there are no perpetrators anymore, no accuser and no accused. This is also the end of all codependency, of being drawn into somebody else's unconscious pattern and thereby enabling it to continue. You will then either separate in love or move more deeply into the now together. So, one side note, Eckhart is not talking about extreme cases of violence or abuse. He's not asking you to simply accept that and move on with the relationship. If those things are happening, you need to end the relationship, separate, and seek help. Now, you can accept that those things did happen, but you move on from the relationship and you seek help. What we're talking about here is the everyday little judgments of a normal relationship. We know that we can't fix and change the other person. Our judgments are not fixing them. And we feel it the other way too, that they can't fix and change us. But if you've ever experienced the time when your significant other has been there for you and completely accepted you exactly as you are, with no judgment, and loved you unconditionally in that way, it is such a beautiful and healing and wonderful thing. And like Eckhart says, that's the greatest catalyst for change. And we can do that for our partners. We can create that space for them. We can love them unconditionally, and we can have zero judgment and just accept what is. And what a beautiful thing that creates. And that's where our presence is really key. When our reactions start coming on, when our triggers come up, we can be present enough to notice them and not respond and not react with that just unconscious, automatic anger response or whatever it is. We can be the silent watcher of our reactions, of our emotions, and be centered and still, and make sure that we can respond how we want to respond and not just the autopilot that sometimes can take us over. So, all right, let's jump into the last big idea. Relationships as spiritual practice. So the last big idea I want to talk about is the idea of not thinking of your relationship as some way to achieve fulfillment or to address all of your problems, but rather as a way to become your best self and learn lessons to grow and to really thrive. And so he says, in a relationship, every crisis represents not only danger, but also opportunity. Why not cooperate with it instead of avoiding relationships or continuing to pursue the phantom of an ideal partner as an answer to your problems or a means of feeling fulfilled? So whenever your relationship is not working, whenever it brings out the madness in you and in your partner, be glad. What was unconscious is being brought up into the light. It is an opportunity for salvation. Every moment, hold the knowing of that moment, particularly of your inner state. If there's anger, know that there's anger. If there's jealousy, defensiveness, the urge to argue, the need to be right, an inner child demanding love and attention, or emotional pain of any kind, whatever it is, know the reality of that moment and hold the knowing. The relationship then becomes your sadhana, your spiritual practice. If you observe unconscious behavior in your partner, hold it in the loving embrace of your knowing so that you don't react. Unconsciousness and knowing cannot coexist for long, even if the knowing is only in the other person and not in the one who's acting out the unconsciousness. If you react to your partner's unconsciousness, you become unconscious yourself. But if you remember to know the reaction, nothing is lost. Wow. Do not accuse each other of being unconscious. The moment you start to argue, you have identified with a mental position and are now defending not only that position, but also your sense of self. The ego is in charge. You have become unconscious. At times, it may be appropriate to point out certain aspects of your partner's behavior. If you are very alert, very present, you can do it without ego involvement, without blaming, without accusing, or making the other person wrong. This is key, especially if we're going to have hard conversations with our partner, to be present, to be centered, and do it without blaming, without accusing, and without making the other one wrong. When your partner behaves unconsciously, relinquish all judgment. Judgment is either to confuse someone else's unconscious behavior with who they are, or project your own unconsciousness onto another person and mistake that for who they are. To relinquish judgment does not mean that you don't recognize the dysfunction and unconsciousness when you see it. It means be the knowing rather than be the reaction. You will then either be totally free of reaction, or you may react and be the knowing, the space in which the reaction is watched and allowed to be. So that is our challenge. That is our work. Now, there's so much more goodness in this chapter that I'd love to talk about, but we'll have to save it for another video. Instead of asking you to like and subscribe to this channel, I'm going to ask you to go outside, be more present, turn your screens off, and try to create a space for someone you love that is completely free of judgment and full acceptance of what is, and see what happens. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you in the next video.